My name is Scott Jeppeson. I'm the woodwind professor at Montana State University Billings. I am the musical director of the Rocky Mountain Jazz Collective, and I play saxophone with the Billings Symphony Orchestra. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my favorite instrument, the saxophone. The saxophone, of all the instruments in the orchestra, is really the baby. It's been around the least amount of time. Clarinets, flutes, most of the brass instruments have been around for hundreds of years. The saxophone itself was invented in 1846 by a Belgium-born inventor named Adolphe Sax. When he first made the instrument, it was something that was used a lot in wind bands and military bands throughout the late 1800s. And it didn't really make its way into mainstream music until the early 1900s, when it started getting used a bit in the music that it's still most well known for, which is jazz music. The first musician that really brought saxophone to prominence was actually a man named Sidney Bechet, who was originally a clarinet player, and he moved to Paris, and he actually came across the instrument in Paris. He found himself a soprano saxophone, and he pretty much set the clarinet aside and made the saxophone his primary instrument. And ever since then, it's really been an important part in jazz and popular music, as well as something that's become more and more common in orchestral and concert bands as well. So the saxophone itself resides in two different worlds. It was the goal of Adolphe Sax to create an instrument that could encompass the best things of the woodwind family and the best things of the brass family, and bring them together into a single instrument to be able to kind of fill in the gap between these two. So it is officially a member of the woodwind family, and the big reason for that is because of the way that it actually produces sound. The instrument itself, as you see, is actually made out of metal. There is some evidence to show that the earliest saxophones were actually made out of wood, but there's kind of a little bit of debate around that as well. But to actually produce a sound on the saxophone all comes down to this single piece of wood. This is called a reed. It's made from cane. The largest producers of this actually comes from southern France, although there's a fair amount of it that's produced in South America these days. And like any instrument, any wind instrument, anything that produces sound actually, we need to have vibration to create that sound. And this is the piece that actually vibrates on woodwind instruments, and the saxophone is no exception. To actually control this sound, we actually have a mouthpiece, and we put the reed on the mouthpiece. And you'll see that if you just simply put that reed on the mouthpiece, it's going to fall off. So we have another piece that we put on here that's called a ligature. And the ligature does nothing more than just simply hold that reed on the mouthpiece, like so. Now, if you were to just simply play the saxophone mouthpiece by itself, it's not the prettiest of sounds. Let me demonstrate. Not something that you're going to want to pay a lot of money and go listen to someone do in concert. However, if we take it and we put it on the neck of the saxophone like this, the actual instrument, it provides sort of an amplification for the sound, but it also provides a refinement of the sound as well. So we can actually hone that sound in, make it something that's prettier, and also we can actually change the pitch of the notes. So now with it on the saxophone, so we can get a whole lot more sound, we can get a whole lot more notes, and there's a lot of things that we can do with the instrument. Now, the alto saxophone is the saxophone that we see most commonly in school bands. And so if you've ever been around any kind of school band, concert bands, you'll usually see that the saxophone is usually sitting off to the kind of towards the right-hand side. Sometimes they move them around between different groups, but it just kind of depends on the ensemble itself. But the alto saxophone is usually that instrument that you see very clearly, because there's usually a lot of them. A lot of people start on the alto saxophone. It's a great beginner saxophone. Some of the other saxophones that you would see in this, and there's actually a whole family to cover a wide range of pitch ranges, is we've got the alto saxophone. Above the alto saxophone, we have an instrument that you don't see as frequently in concert bands, but you do see fairly frequently in jazz, known as the soprano saxophone. So like I said before, the soprano saxophone, it's a straight instrument most of the time. This is actually the instrument that Sidney Bechet had originally found and decided he was going to make this his main instrument. So that's the soprano saxophone. The other one that we actually do see fairly frequently, actually the other two that we see fairly frequently in concert bands would be the baritone saxophone, which is a big one. It has a curved neck on it, and it plays down in the same kind of range that we would hear tubas and trombones play. I don't have one of those to show you right now, but I do have the one that's in between. So we have soprano saxophone, alto saxophone, and the next one down is the tenor saxophone. Now, the tenor saxophone is my own personal favorite. It's the one that I play the most. It's the one that we see very, very frequently through many different jazz groups over the last 110, 120 years. And it just has this deep, beautiful, mellow sound to it. So this is an example of the tenor saxophone. So you hear the saxophone, it's that sound we've heard over and over again in many different jazz groups. The other thing that's really great about the saxophone, and the reason why it lends itself so well to many different types of music, is it's really an instrument that was made, like many other woodwinds, for some acrobatics. You can move your fingers around very quickly, and you can get notes that come out very clean without a whole, I'm not going to say without effort, but with less effort than possibly something like a trombone. And that's the saxophone.